Okay, so today I got pulled into a check-in meeting with my administrator at school, and she had this lovely list of concerns that she wanted to bring to my attention. But my favorite amongst them is, we've noticed an intentional attempt at teaching your students about their legal and constitutional rights. That's the concern. They're concerned. Why are you concerned? Why is that a concern? Why is it a concern? Why is it a concern? Why does that concern you? Why is it a concern?
There's a teacher down in Austin, Texas area, and she's being reprimanded now. Reprimanded for teaching her students. I guess the administrators are afraid of what she may be teaching them, and maybe, those overlords of small government might come down on them. Her name is Sophia Marie, and apparently she's pushing back and probably prepared to catch all those consequences. So she was talking about to her students about the history of the Pledge of Allegiance, and discovered that it was about trying to bring the country together after the Civil War, when folks were like, yo, we hate what's going on here because we want to keep our enslaved people. And other folks, I guess, were too oppressive for that. So they wanted to bring everyone together. Once these students knew this whole thing, they decided to take a stand. Let's watch more.
Just for some context and clarity here, this concern particularly came about after they started to notice that my third grade students, my class, was sitting during the Pledge of Allegiance during our assemblies, and which they decided to do for themselves after learning during Holocaust Remembrance Week about propaganda and the Hitler Youth, and why Hitler targeted young people and students and children in particular to spread his ideology. And they were curious actually about where the Pledge of Allegiance came from in the United States. And we looked it up together and discovered that after the Civil War, when the country was divided about slavery, they needed to bring the country together. And who best to instill patriotism than young children, because it's easier to learn than to unlearn.
Now, we assume that a lot of these students just are brainless, and then they have no thoughts and no kinds of plans in their heads once they hear some reality to their history and also our present. And then once they ask for something else happening or something else to be done differently, and actually come up with a plan that she actually assists them in just figuring, that means that she's indoctrinating them. I mean, it's not the the recital of the pledge over and over and over and over and over again that's indoctrination. It's actually her telling them about the history of it, and then they're hearing about it and coming up with something that they would like to do. Again, the assumption is that kids of this age just don't have that. One more piece here, because again, as she was talking about this productive form of protest, where it doesn't even have to be loud, they're not even coming at anyone, it's just a silent protest. That's when they crack down on it. This is the last part.
My kids, my students, decided amongst themselves that they didn't want to do that anymore, and they wanted to actually protest the Pledge of Allegiance. And I told them that there is also silent protesting, which is sometimes more powerful than being loud and disruptive and getting yourselves into trouble. And I told them about Colin Kaepernick, and they decided that they would rather sit during the Pledge of Allegiance. And my admin doesn't believe that they are staying seated for reasons that they can fully articulate and fully understand, and is concerned that I am, she said, indoctrinating my students, indoctrinating them. And I am just so grateful that I'm finally getting acknowledged for all the hard work I have done this year to indoctrinate my students into being critical thinkers. They're making decisions for themselves, and not just because an authority tells them that they have to.
I'm not really sure if they have a full thought process of what is this going to happen with these children. What do you think they're going to become? What do you think is going to then happen to them because they actually have an opinion about something that's based in the truth and the history that we've seen? This is actually what they're afraid of. A little bit of free thought, what I've heard, Fran.
I mean, we talked about capitalism, right? And like this idea that we live in the best system and everything is great, and all this inequality you're seeing around us is because of socialism. And here you have the other piece of this moment that we're living in history, which is neo-fascism. And we don't say that lightly, right? And fascism requires a lack of dissent. It requires a uniformity of thought. It requires erasing and changing history, and it requires not questioning anything, even if it is our own history, like the Pledge of Allegiance. Where did it come from? How do we feel about it? You have to feel the way we tell you to feel. You have to obey who we tell you to obey, no matter if they rightfully won an election or not. They won it because they're the person in charge, and it's not questioning authority. And that's amazing to me for a movement that also, with a straight face, says they believe in freedom of speech.
100%. Right? And you think about the approach that many of these folks think we're supposed to have when it comes to loving the country, right? Which I would assume a majority of folks love the country. It's what is they want to do with their country because they love it so much. Maybe we love because it actually advances, or at least we say that it does. So if someone sees something like the history of the pledge, and then we assume you have to be loyal to the country by reciting the pledge, why isn't the country doing things to make you want to do things like that? It has to be just automatic, and then later, after we screw you over a few more times, keep that same energy. It sounds like an abusive relationship. You get nothing out of it, but unless you keep on bowing down to the things that sometimes screw you over, or sometimes we find the history behind it, we don't like that anymore. It's no, you have to bow your head and do it anyway. Does that sound like a freedom-loving country to you, or does that sound like one of these countries that we like to complain about isn't as good as us? We have elements of that, but we like to hide it in plain,
yes,
right in front of everyone. You gotta be honest.